Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. We are here to continue our celebration of Star Trek's 60th anniversary. And what better way to do that than with the most dangerous invasive species ever in science fiction, Tribbles. With me on this voyage is Michael Skeen. We've done panels together, we've done podcasts together, and now we're going to talk about Trek's 60th. Michael, how are you?
Oh, good. And yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. You know, Trouble with Troubles is easily one of the most beloved episodes, and it's a personal favorite of mine. So very happy to have the chance to talk about it.
Excellent. So let's dig in. So, Michael, what's a tribble?
A Tribble is a very cute, fluffy creature that is born pregnant and eats voraciously, and basically just sits there and manages to breed and breed and breed and breed and eat and eat and eat and eat. And everybody but Klingons seems to love them, and they seem to love everybody else but Klingons.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with what went wrong there. It's similar to not liking a golden retriever. It takes a special person to not get along with a golden retriever. There are some breeds of dogs that aren't snuggly, but a golden just wants to be loved and played fetch. And a tribble, it's born to snuggle and make a lot more tribbles.
Yeah.
So let's just highlight what is some of the dangers of an invasive species. And this is from what Congress has defined under 16 USCS section 4701A2. When environmental conditions are favorable, non-indigenous species become established, may compete with or prey upon native species of plants, fish, and wildlife, may carry diseases or parasites that affect native species, and may disrupt the aquatic environment and economy of affected nearshore areas. And again, that's obviously an aquatic version because ships can come in, pump bilge water into, say, San Francisco Bay, and it's got mussels and other creatures in there from the other side of the planet, and there are no predators for those things, and they just thrive. And which is why we don't want ships dumping bilge water that have been overseas in San Francisco Bay, because we can get weird, ugly things that will just take over the bay, and we don't want that.
Right.
Or people with, hey, a python would be a great pet, and then they realize it's not, and then release it into the Everglades, and now we have pythons in a place that didn't have pythons before.
Yeah. Well, and I remember years ago when I was living on the East Coast when the snakehead fish was introduced, to much everybody's chagrin, because it also no predator and is a very invasive species, and I think they're still dealing with that.
Yeah, there's a variety of ways to deal with the invasive species with, cut off the source of them to enter, or to poison them, or to allow hunting of said species. There's a variety of approaches that states and the federal government have taken to protect the local environment so you don't get overrun, which highlights why a triple is an invasive species, which involves math.
Yeah.
If one triple is producing an average litter of 10 every 12 hours over a period of 3 days, you can get over 1,771,561 triples. That's a lot of triples. And if those landed on Earth, what do you do? I mean, I wrote a blog post about this many years ago, but can you eat a triple? Can you make tribble slaughterhouses so you can solve world hunger? Or would that just be like really gross and just horrible in the process? And the it's probably a bad idea because you can't ramp up when you're getting over a million of the little critters every 3 days. So lots of
And
problems there.
yeah, they say mostly fur, so I don't know really what you would eat of them anyway.
No, no, you don't. I mean, but when they're introduced in the trouble with triples, we have some notes here that we can talk about. And Michael, what do you think are some of the legal consequences of bringing an invasive species onto a space station?
Well, this is actually an interesting for, because usually we don't get into the laws too much in the Federation in Star Trek, but there is the Dangerous Species Act where if a dangerous species is brought onto the ship, it's punishable by 20 years in prison in a Federation penal colony. They don't really define what dangerous is, but Kirk at least seemed to interpret it enough that it would include tribbles. And I'm sure most people think dangerous is in this is a monster that could eat you, but tribbles certainly are very invasive and would be very dangerous. And and so yeah, I think their punishments would be very severe. And then also, I mean, it's just us living in California. There's all sorts of restrictions. Like Section 2118 of the Fish and Game Code has all sorts of restrictions about animals can be brought into California. I mean, the list is very exhaustive of, mammals, birds, fish, you name it. I think anybody who's driven into California was stopped at the border and was asked about, what you're carrying. So it's because there's a lot of damage that can be done. And that's not even the scale of a tribble, which is just insanely worse.
So there's exotic pets that are as dangerous as wild animals, and there are laws in place that order those animals destroyed, which would make sense in the case of a triple if it could literally displace the population of the planet.
Right.
So, because of how quickly they breed, when you look at shows that like The Walking Dead, where you have the zombie apocalypse taking place and the living get overwhelmed, it's like that, but with furry creatures that just keep growing and growing. Instead of snuggling, they're going to suffocate the life out of the planet. Not not good. So
Right. Right. Well, they'll snuggle you with love. They'll just eat your lunch.
yeah, exactly. There's that. At least they're not carnivorous tribbles. But those did exist in one of the Prodigy episodes where we had a Klingon scientist trying to deal with tribbles. And again, there are lots of tribbles episodes.
Yeah.
So we have in the original episode, we have a spy, and they poison the grain that's on the K7 space station. Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the grain. So the show gives us the perspective about the stakes of the grain, which is that it's meant for Sherman's planet, which right now is basically based on a treaty of the Federation Klingon War. That basically there's an agreement that whichever the Federation or the Klingon can cultivate it, most effectively, will get access to the planet. I'm presuming there's no sentient creatures that would object to being, occupied, but that's probably another story. But anyway, so it's a very rough planet, and the only grain that can cultivate, at least the Federation has access to, is quadrotriticale, which tons of this stuff was shipped into the K7 deep space probe or deep space station. And that's meant to basically go to the planet because it can actually cultivate on that planet, thus, giving the Federation the chance to take control of the planet. And so, as far as like repercussions of that, so, who poisons it? We have, Andre Darvin, who is and actually a Klingon who's been surgically altered to look like a human. And so, he's clearly a spy. And so there's actually, at least, looking, analogizing it to the United States, there's a lot of different, criminal codes, 18 USC section 792 through 799. There's a bunch of different espionage crimes that that may potentially apply. Punishment can range from 10 years in prison to up to life imprisonment or even the death penalty. Fortunately, the Federation has mostly gotten rid of the death penalty, so that shouldn't be an issue. But otherwise, but at least either 10 years to life imprisonment. And given that this is a planet that they need the grain to cultivate, they need to basically develop the planet, and they need to develop it before the Klingons. I think this would have massive consequences, and which you would think. But and as it turns out, though, he didn't really actually suffer too many consequences from the Federation. Because there was another episode, Tribbles and Tribulations, which Deep Space Nine, which we learned that it's actually the Klingons that were far more severe to him than the Federation. I don't even know they did any jail time in the Federation. And so then the Klingons basically did what they call a discommendation, which for Klingons, you basically get stripped of any status. Your family loses honor. You get shunned by the Klingons. I mean, you basically don't even you're not even considered like really a citizen, or you have very limited rights. In fact, they just refer to you as like that, as opposed to that, and as opposed to basically a fellow Klingon. And so there's no respect, and then it's not just you, it's your family, and your family's basically dishonored for 7 generations. So very brutal. I'd imagine this is probably something you'll be covering also later on in another podcast. But this is a good, tease for the topic.
Thank you, and well done. Yeah, there are times watching Star Trek when you go, that's the only thing that happened? You just sent the spy back? Was this like some trade that took
Yeah.
place? Like, I mean, did was there a Gary Powers that had to walk across a bridge and they sent the other spy back? Like, what's going
Well,
on?
remember the Klingons don't take prisoners.
Yes,
So I don't
yeah,
know if they had anybody to exchange, but
but
you do wonder about that. And it's strange because Deep Space Nine, that episode takes place 100 years after Trouble with Tribbles. So would it be so hard to say, okay, 20 years in prison and then basically scratching a living throughout the galaxy, because he doesn't really have a home.
yeah, like that's well again, like jumping to Star Trek Academy, you had Mama Mir be part of, killing a dude, a Starfleet officer, and she gets sent to a rehabilitation colony. That doesn't sound like, I mean, one, rehabilitation, so they haven't given up on like saving somebody. And she eventually,
We know about rehabilitation and euphemisms. So.
yeah, we don't generally, again, the United States prison system gave up on that. I'm not passing judgment on that, but like we don't, I mean,
Right.
like it's now punitive of we're punishing you for doing this as a deterrent from the rest of society to do similar things. I get the more evolved sense of justice that we're not just going to execute the spy. Like, okay, good, but just sending them back so we could continue on, that seems weird. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, we don't really have that much background about how long he was, an assistant to Barris, but he had to have been passing on information to the Klingons, and I'm sure the Klingons are the ones who ordered him, sabotage that grain because, we need more time to get whatever, to better cultivate the planet.
yeah. However, it is cool they got the same actor. That
Yeah.
that this
Yeah.
episode of Deep Space Nine came out in '96, which was the 30th anniversary of Trek. So both Deep Space Nine and Voyager had anniversary episodes, and so the Voyager one was with Captain Sulu on the Excelsior. Cool. And this one was a instead of flashback, it's them going back in time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Nito, again, good way to honor the past.
Yeah.
Like,
That's one
and
thing I always respect about Star Trek. If an actor is available to return to the role, they get the actor, and they unless they refuse, and then they have to recast. But that's one thing I always respected about Star Trek is they kind of it's like you joined a family.
especially with Deep Space Nine, you had multiple Klingons from the original series that appeared in episodes. It's like,
Right.
well done, guys. They got their foreheads fixed after, the illness passed. And it's like, good job.
Yeah.
Good job.
I loved Worf's non-answer when explaining, when they asked him about why the Klingons appear differently back then.
We don't like discussing it. It's like, because like they knew they had to address it because there are those who watched the motion picture and had the, neck break of what those are Klingons? What? Why?
Right, right.
And, when they finally explain it in Enterprise, like, okay, there was a disease. All right. Makes sense. And they get it treated and people go back to having the big foreheads. So, but there's more to Klingon craziness here. You have a note. Did the Mutual Admiration Society violate the Geneva Convention by transporting the Tribbles to the Klingon ship? And wasn't that Scotty's doing?
Well, it was Scotty, Spock, and McCoy all worked out a scheme to make it happen. Of course, no one wanted to take credit for doing it. I think Scotty was the one who actually technically transported the Tribbles to the Klingon ship, but I'm sure that Spock had the logistics, and McCoy, added his value, added value to it, and
Again, that's from a command discipline perspective, like none of them wanting to cop up.
right,
It's the age old, if you don't ask the question, I don't have to lie,
right, right,
situation. It's like, oh no, like
yeah,
this is, what did you boys do? What paperwork am I going to have to deal with? And it's like, like, did you transport them into space? Because that's wrong. And
yeah.
no, no, they transported them to the Klingon ship. So is that a war crime? I don't think so. But what's your thoughts on this?
Well, the way I kind of looked at it, we've got stuff like the Geneva Protocol, which prevents basically using bioweapons, and so we learned about the reactions the Tribbles have to Klingons and the reaction the Klingons have to Tribbles. Like you see, that Klingon when he's in the bar, that pained look on his face when the Klingon just brought close to it. I mean, it's to me, I always think needles on a chalkboard is what that basically he's kind of his whole body's experiencing, and the Tribble's similar too. The Tribble's like just like screeching and giving a very an animated reaction to it when they're normally very passive, and so it's very clear the Klingons absolutely cannot stand these Tribbles, and the Tribbles, and that's not even talking about the problems they present with the being an invasive species. It's just they really hate these things, and at least Spock and McCoy knew that absolutely because they were there when Kirk revealed who that Andre Darvin, him being a Klingon. So they knew it was something that they were absolutely hostile, were very uncomfortable with, and it was something they also, and so I think sending it over there. I mean, is it the same as using mustard gas? No, but it's something that would make the Klingons very uncomfortable, and they also knew the risks they had by having a huge amount of Klingon, having a bunch of Klingons on the ship, going through the air vents to get to whatever food replicators or whatever, however the Klingons store their food, and so they knew there was massive risk and that there was potential to be for a lot of danger for and so yeah, I could see that would not go well with you know, with the Klingon Empire, and so I so since I guess nobody necessarily got killed, it's not, again, not the level of using, like again, mustard gas or some other really obs, or but it's still it's putting everybody in a bad situation that's on that ship.
Yeah, it's to the Klingons, it might be like mustard gas. Like
Yeah.
it's, we have to think from their perspective.
Yeah.
They
Like
don't
it
like,
won't kill you, it's just make you maybe make you wish you were.
it'd be
But
like beaming in a bunch of snakes like to a kindergarten class. It's like,
or Indiana
yeah,
Jones's house or whatever.
yeah, it's like not appreciated on all kinds of levels. But you raised an animal cruelty issue, and it'd be like sending golden retrievers in to be bait dogs, and people doing illegal dog fights for the golden retrievers to be ripped apart by vicious dogs bred for fighting. Like that's not okay on any level.
No.
I mean, so again, there's an animal cruelty issue here that you can't weaponize tribbles because now the tribbles are the victim of what's happening. But this is late 1960s and it's meant to be funny. So
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, because the episode ends with, Scotty making a pun saying, "Oh, there'll be no Tribble at all," and then they all start laughing.
yeah, which again, it's very rare for a TOS episode to not end with like everyone smiling. There's like Sitting on the Edge of Forever doesn't.
Right.
There could be a couple others that don't, but the majority of them end with something hopeful, like everyone's happy, like we all got away, everybody's
Right.
okay,
Right.
as opposed to we just weaponized triples against our Cold War enemy.
Right.
It's
Oh, speaking of which, I guess one thing it's kind of sort of a non sequitur. We were talking about kind of like, the how like the Mutual Admiration Society was acting and everything. This Star Trek episode for me is a real unique one because it's one of the rare times I can think of where a Starfleet officer just phones in the job. Because, I mean, basically the whole, basically protect the Quadritriticale, like Kirk, is just I think he's annoyed because he feels like false pretenses brought him to K7 and then he's stuck, basically safeguarding this grain. And, it's just like the last thing he wants to do. But it's interesting though, because in most Star Trek episodes, and when they get orders that they don't like, there's usually one of two things, Measure of a Man, where episode where Riker basically had to defend, or basically claim, prosecute the data was property, as opposed to kind of like a sentient creature. Riker had said, I don't like this. It's probably the last thing he wanted to do, but he did it to the best of his ability because that's what Starfleet does. It's like you do the job to the best of your ability. Or by contrast, if you hate it so much, you just ignore the order and don't do what you're told to do and hope the consequences work out. Like First Contact, when the Enterprise is protecting, the neutral zone at the Romulan border while the rest of the Federation is engaged in the Borg. And Picard basically says, well, as Data would say, to hell with those orders. And then Picard goes not only to join the battle, but take charge of the battle. And which was good because then he helped them win. But again, it's there's not that many times where I think, where you have a Starfleet officer saying, okay, I'm going to do a half-assed job here and just not really work the problem.
Yeah, I think Kirk didn't like being lied to. And when you had middle management trying to boss him around, that doesn't play well. It's like this is not what the calling 911 is for.
Right,
So he gets called to K7 with like, this isn't an emergency. You're calling me because of this.
right,
Like,
right,
we're supposed to stop wars. We're supposed to save people. And
right,
now I'm playing, clerical,
right,
attaché because you've made this weird mess and want me
right.
to fix it for you.
Yeah, I mean, he even had an admiral call him up and say, "Do your job."
Yeah, which would be like, seriously? Like, I mean, like, did he go scream in the pillow after that? I mean, because like, what would I
But
mean? What's nice about TOS, you do have Kirk be like vulnerable. Like, it's not in front of the entire crew. Like,
right,
he'll go to his quarters and like might just talk to one person.
right,
It's
right,
it's it's Spock, it's McCoy, sometimes Rand, and like with the pressure of the job. But this is like, are you kidding me? Like I have to deal with this? It's like I'm used to getting shot at. Like this is not
right,
risk is our business to I need to make sure the grain's okay. Thanks. Uh,
right, right.
but again, they do uncover spy ring and nefarious conduct. So
Yeah,
yay.
yeah, and I mean, really, Tribbles saved the day by getting killed by the poison Quadritriticale. So, thank you for your sacrifice.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure how you bury all of them, but yeah, that's an issue. Which also raises another oh, again, we're now dealing with a form of dangerous warfare of we're gonna go poison crops. Again, not good there.
Yeah,
But the one of the follow-up animated series from the mid 70s, we see them Serial Jones again, and the Klingons develop a creature to eat Tribbles.
right,
The
right.
Glomer. I'm not sure the pronunciation. It's been a while since I've seen that episode.
Thought it was Glommer, but
Okay, cool. But
yeah, you say Glommer, I say Glommer.
but it raised the issue. So you made another animal to eat the invasive species. What happens to the other animal? Like, if you've engineered them to die when the threat's gone, okay, that's still messed up. But I mean, like, is that any different than using a poison? I would say it is because you're now weaponizing another animal. that you bred specifically for this. So I mean that's uncomfortable and weird.
Yeah.
Uh, if
Well,
you
and yeah, and another interesting, we're talking about, things that happen in, the consequences of actions and everything. And so, them beaming the Tribbles, the Klingon ship, that had disastrous results for the Tribbles, because then at that point, the Klingons basically went and essentially hunted down the Tribble planet, wiped that out, and basically killed all Tribbles that they could find. And so by the time we're at 100 years later, they basically didn't exist anymore.
yeah, which would be again, you had Odo
Yeah.
making
Well, that's got
fun
an
of
asterisk to it, but anyway.
yeah, making fun of the great Tribble hunt.
Right.
There was the short trek episode about the trouble with Edward, where you had, it's basically Tribbles are part of the high breeding was from human experimentation, and you lose a ship and a very dumb Starfleet officer. Uh, like there are those who've complained about that episode, and I think rightly so, because the captain who is court-martialed because that's what happens when you lose a ship. She says that Lieutenant Edward or whatever his last name was an idiot. Like that's again, not very Trek-like. Uh,
Right.
but then there were humorous instances of people backing away with phaser rifles, shooting tribbles as they multiply. Uh, Again, so many problems with that invasive species.
Right. Well, don't forget, Cyrano Jones is apparently quite the Renaissance man because he also did genetic manipulation of tribbles, to basically, which essentially like they ate and this is in the animated series. They ate and then they just essentially just kept growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And it turns out it was actually this gigantic, tribble colony waiting to explode into action, which, much to the Klingons' regret, they find out when they try and shoot one.
Yeah. Um, so Cyril Jones gets sentenced to 17.9 years for cleaning up tribbles, which raises, is that cruel and unusual punishment? Your thoughts, then I'll go.
Well, yeah, well, I guess I have a couple thoughts about that. So first off, I think that I get the poetic justice in him literally having to clean up his mess. That's, there's a certain amount of, like I say, you can certainly appreciate that. On the other hand, there's a lot of problems with that type of, punishment. The first one being is so you wouldn't know it from the episode because special effects were expensive, but K7 is actually a pretty busy port, and they have ships coming in and out. And we know how much everybody other than Klingons love Tribbles, and how many Tribbles you think will basically hop on different ships that come in, and as they all leave, we're basically just doing Tribble infestations across the entire galaxy. So not such a great idea from that perspective. Um, the other thing was that I mean, it was interesting because I guess Kirk basically was trying to do this as kind of a side deal, where basically they were going to impound Cyrano Jones's ship until the troubles were all cleared out, and I guess then they wouldn't prosecute him. And but an interesting thing with that is, I'd imagine the Federation probably has some amount of statute of limitations, which in the U.S. is usually like 3, 4 years for a lot of crimes. And so say he spends 3 years cleaning up and then realize, well, you can't prosecute me now. I'm out of here. Um,
Unless the
I
tribbles
guess he
keep
got lucked out. What's that?
breeding, which means that the problem's ongoing.
Right, right. Yeah, and I don't know if Spock's math is 100% accurate about 17.9 years, but yeah, I do love but then I guess the Glommer comes around, and so that I guess clears out all the
Yeah.
tribbles, so he's able to escape.
It's like, do you vent to space? I mean, do you try to do spay and neuter? Like, what's the play here? Because again, but if it's an invasive species, you can destroy an invasive species, even if it's adorable. And normally, invasive species aren't cute and snuggly. It's a zebra mussel or a python. And those aren't known. I mean, you don't want to cuddle with the python for numerous reasons,
No.
but Yeah, it's a I understand remediating them through poison or disintegration. Venting to space probably is going to be a hazard to navigation if you have a few million Tribble bodies floating in the vacuum. Uh, or you decide to destroy the space station in order to preserve everybody else.
Yeah, send it into the sun.
Yeah, it's like, that's the only way. We'll build another one. So, I mean, that'd be a dark ending. This Enterprise towing the space station to a nearby star.
You know,
Sorry,
yeah,
we're only going to beam people
yep,
out,
yep.
filter out tribbles, and then
Borrow
melt
from
this
another franchise, nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
again. Again, it's an invasive species, so like again, those ones aren't snuggly. They're explosive,
Right.
and here you go.
But one
So
thing it was interesting. I know that with this also is it's kind of funny that they have like no quarantine protocols or anything when the species nobody knows anything about comes on board. I mean, either comes into the K7 spaceport and then brought onto the Enterprise. Like McCoy knows nothing about the Tribbles, and other than oh well, these are kind of cute, and you know, and there's
it,
like no protocols to like see is there a problem with having bringing these things on board. I mean,
it,
like if
it,
my wife and I wanted to relocate to Hawaii, our dogs would have to be quarantined for up to 120 days, and that's
yeah, it's like good luck bringing a dog to Australia. Like they're just
yeah,
not
or the
going.
UK, yeah.
You just no. It's it's like that's going to be a problem on a whole bunch of levels of Fido's not going to see you for 4 months. So yeah, good stuff there. Uh my word. So lots there. So we do see triples a few other times, and they clearly had to have dealt with the breeding issue. So we
Right.
see a triple in Search for Spock. And when the crew of the Enterprise returns in the Botany Bay, it's not to save Earth from a tribble infestation, it's to save the Earth from a probe. So like they're not breeding. And Star Trek Generations, one of the escaping children has a tribble. And when the Farragut rescues the crew of the Enterprise D, it's not like they were barbecuing tribbles to survive. Like they like the tribble was not multiplying. So
Right.
good there. Um, so
Yeah.
clearly
Well,
they figure it out. So the cute little fuzzballs don't.
yeah. Well, they also have Trouble shows up in Star Trek Into Darkness as well.
Oh my, yes, yes, for medical experimentation, which
That's
is
how he figured out the magic blood, save the day.
yeah, yeah, they don't no qualms about medical experimentation. So we'll use the tribble as a guinea pig and see what happens when we inject uh, genetically altered blood into it from a human being. What could go wrong? So is there anything else troubling about tribbles that we should address, Michael?
I don't know if we want to talk about the interesting thing was the DS9 Deep Space Nine
Oh yes.
episode. So at that point, Tribbles are theoretically near extinct. And then guess what returned from the past with the Defiant when they returned to Deep Space Nine? A bunch of Tribbles. We go to Quarks and they're overrun with Tribbles. And they've got that problem to deal with, which I don't think they ever actually addressed that. Um, I know it was like it was mostly meant for a laugh, but I don't recall if they ever addressed that. How they
It,
got how they dealt with them.
it's
But the
better
interesting
that
thing is
we
the whole reason this is brought up is because they're being basically well the time variance authority equivalent essentially is grilling Cisco about what happened, and he kind of forgets to tell them that there's no trouble. The Tribbles came back, and that basically the species have been repopulated essentially.
I mean there was still again generations is about was slightly before that. So it's not like tribbles were we saw one. Like they might be rare pets then, but it's probably better that we don't know what happened to the tribbles. If they just asked Worf to handle the problem.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, because there is precedent about Tribbles on a space station not being a good idea.
that they just, Mr. Worf, take care of it, and like just never discuss it again.
Yeah,
Uh,
gladly so.
not going in the logbook. We're just gonna let Worf work this out for everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, we're gonna owe him a solid. Or did they come up with something less, horrific of drop off at some planet or try to again spay all of them? So
Yeah,
they,
or just load them all up into a ship and send it through the wormhole and just figure it's somebody else's problem.
right to the Dominion. Yeah, what could go wrong? So yeah, there's all kinds of weird, creepy problems with that. But again, they've appeared multiple times. Most recently they were in Prodigy. I don't know if they appeared in Discovery at all. Uh, and I don't think they've been in Academy unless there was a really subtle reference I missed.
Yeah, I
But
didn't notice it. I didn't see it in Strange New Worlds either.
because that would be too early. So like
Yeah,
you can't unless Spock didn't see it. I mean, like that'd be
that's
weird.
true.
Maybe there was something in Discovery where there was one. And like if a changeling appeared in there, maybe there was a Tribble someplace on one of the planets in the background scene. I don't know. Uh, but again, lots of ways Tribbles can be troubling.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back for more Trek coverage because there's a lot more Trek to discuss. So, everyone, wherever you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky. Take care, everyone. Take care.